And we actually do get a dopamine release from that. Like when we just order the wine at the bar and we feel the anxiety completely leave our body before we even drink it. That's a dopamine release because dopamine is a motivation chemical, right? And we actually are going to obtain what we set our mind on. So you have to detach that belief that it's going to make you have a better time. So you're not chasing after an imaginary goal.
Thanks for tuning in to the Elevation Recovery Podcast, your hub for addiction recovery strategies, hosted by Chris Scott and Matt Finch.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Elevation Recovery Podcast. I'm Chris Scott, and today we have a guest we haven't had on in a long time, but it's going to be a really cool conversation as always. She's super sharp and has a lot to share with us today. Briana Theroux, thanks for being on the show.
Hi.
Yeah, it's what's been maybe a year since we did an episode. I can't recall.
Yep.
But,
I think it's a year.
You've been out. You said you have more energy now.
Yeah, I had a baby in that year.
Exactly. Yep. You and Tana both. Coach Tana.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Fit recovery coach babies. Not myself included, unfortunately. People are going to have to wait, but maybe at some point. But yeah, I also wanted to talk to you because recently, as we discussed before the podcast, I interviewed Mark Sheeran. We had a really great episode. We had a great conversation, and he's the author of or co-author of the Freedom Model. And the Freedom Model is something that you told me about. I'd heard of it, but I hadn't read the book. So because of you, I went to Amazon, I ordered the book, and I realized that I was having a lot of the same epiphanies in this never-ending evolution, intellectual evolution of mine. And fit recovery is a very open-ended thing. I never wanted to claim I had all the answers. I feel like when anyone decides they're a guru and then they know everything, they just become progressively less interesting. And I'd rather explore. To me, I wouldn't be able to do this if I didn't keep exploring and try to be open-ended. But anyway, the Freedom Model ended up being something that really captured my interest because he articulated things that I was thinking, that a lot of my clients were thinking, and it kind of like completed that journey away from the very dogmatic 12-step, but it's not even just 12-step. There are all sorts of different,
a lot of like recovery modules, right? And
exactly. Yeah.
Even the ones that are not 12-step, like there's a new movement away from 12-step. And a lot of those use the same thing, like you're a victim and you need to get all these things, like all these traumas figured out before you quit drinking. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of it's moving that direction, and that's not right either. So the Freedom Model ties all that together and breaks it down how it's wrong.
I think it helps people rescue their own belief in their free will. We have free will. It's a property of humanity. But the question is whether we exercise it, whether we acknowledge it, because we can choose to act like automatons. And then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, and a lot of people, like I get in this debate often online. I try not to, but I get roped in on free will and determinism. And because my entire life philosophy and what I do in life and how I move through life is very free will, driven, you have the ability to change. And my point of contention with determinism is sure, I'll give it to them. There might be determinants for every single thing, right? But we're never going to find those out. There's no way we're going to know all determinants for every single move we make through life. So we do know that the belief, if we believe we can change, we actually put more effort forth in changing our behaviors. So what is the benefit of believing in determinism? There is none.
As I said, I think if
it's true, there's no benefit.
Right. It can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe that you're determined, you'll act in such a way that would reflect that reality that you've
exactly. And we know that we have scientific data showing that if we believe that the outcome is predetermined, we will not put effort forth.
Right. So I want to back up a little bit. I may have gotten ahead for some people who are listening and don't even know what the Freedom Model is. So I think to address that, maybe I'll just ask you, what was your situation like? And this would be a recap from the last time you were on. And how did you discover the freedom model? And obviously there are lots of modalities you're familiar with. You're a diet and fitness expert as well. How does that tie in with your philosophy and life?
Yeah, so I've had a pretty rough like upbringing. I was around drugs and alcohol my entire life. My mom like cooked meth when I was growing up, and so I was around that kind of lifestyle. And then I fell into like probably binge drinking through my 20s, very rare though. And then I went through a divorce in my early 30s, and that's when it spiraled. And I started drinking to like blackout point frequently, probably a couple times a week. That's how I found you, and I found the freedom model and a bunch of different things, because I was trying everything to just figure out what was going on with my brain, because that's what I do. I want to figure out the problem and solve it. I do not like the 12-step kind of stuff, never appealed to me with my background in nutrition. And I was aware of like Overeaters Anonymous and that kind of stuff, and I thought that was bullshit. Right. Because my entire dieting kind of stuff is like, you take accountability for yourself and you learn what is wrong with your brain and you fix it. And so that's how I found you and the freedom model, is because you're very self-driven and you fit into my world view very well.
Yeah, well, I think also the freedom model and nutrient repair, and I would say fit recovery encompasses hopefully more than just nutrient repair, but that's the kickoff point for a lot of people. That jump starts people's ability, or at least desire, to start making better changes, and focus on repairing your biochemistry, so that you can summon the optimism and genuine desire to keep moving forward, rather than feeling like you're dragging a boulder up a mountain. There are people who can change, and I discussed with Mark, there are examples of people who have quit cold turkey from a liter of day vodka habit, and never did any therapies whatsoever, and probably went on with all sorts of nutrient deficiencies, but they pulled it from somewhere that most people can't find somehow, and they did it. So all right, you can do it. You don't need anything except your own free will. However, it's a lot easier and more fun and probably healthier if you incorporate other modalities such as nutrient repair.
Yeah, and it's not just the idea of free will. A lot of people get caught up on that. It's the beliefs that we are indoctrinated with as a child. So it's in our unconscious mind. And to be able to grasp that after an alcohol addiction is pretty hard. So nutrient repair, what it does is it makes it easier to grasp these concepts and understand that although it is free will, there's beliefs behind that is driving your behavior. And so you have to uncover those beliefs, and you have to have the prefrontal cortical activity to even address those beliefs, right?
Right. I'm a big fan
That's what the nutrient repair does.
Exactly. I'm a big fan of trying to be in flow states. I don't want to be using free will actively and explicitly in everything that I do. It's kind of like when you're driving. If you're driving down a fast highway, assuming you're not a new driver, you're not like analyzing in depth and trying to figure out mathematically what curve you're going to hit or whatever, and what speed you're going, and you have a feel for it. Life's way more fun when you can develop a feel for it. And with things like alcohol addiction, what happens is the feel that you've developed, what I call your subconscious autopilot, which you can turn off, but that magnetism towards alcohol that you feel, that's just the familiar. And that's something that you've learned through repetition and emotional intensity. And, of course, there's the complicating factors such as the GABA glutamate imbalance. But once you learn about that and fix it by, taking glutamine and B6 and magnesium, or perhaps a benzodiazepine if it's really bad, you start to liberate yourself from that trap. And then you can start doing other things that feel way better. And those become your new flow states over time, such that now I'm at the point where if I drive past a bar or a liquor store, even if I went to it 10 years ago, I don't feel anything. But it used to feel like a huge burden because I had all of these beliefs, as you say.
Well, because you still desired it. Like you need so much willpower when you still desire that thing.
You have to extinguish the desire.
And when you don't have that desire, when you untangle all these erroneous beliefs, it's nothing. I don't even notice when I go out. Like, I'm just like, I don't want to feel like shit. So I'm not gonna engage in that.
And I'm usually drinking, I have my CBD sparkling water, my dram here. No
Oh,
affiliation. I've emailed them. I wanted affiliation. I haven't heard back yet, but I'll pitch their product for free. I love it. But I have these. If it's a get together here, I'm doing lemon juice and club soda or sparkling mineral water, even better if I'm out. And I just literally don't notice. It doesn't occur to me that other people aren't drinking what I'm drinking. It doesn't enter my mind. I was trying to explain that to a client last week. And it's very hard. I had to remember that it would have been hard for me to believe years ago that if I could go, I don't like going to clubs, but I could go to a club and I could appreciate it. Maybe I might not have a good time at this point. I'm very Zen, but I could maybe appreciate it if it was cool and not too loud. And I liked the people I was with, and the thought of pounding vodka wouldn't even occur to me at all.
No, that's, I'm in the same spot. Like, it just doesn't appeal to me at all. I just don't want to feel like that. I personally, I didn't see any benefit in replacing alcohol with like alcohol-free versions of anything, but now I do, now that I'm further away from that, the drive, that the beast, or whatever you want to call it. Like, I do have alcohol-free wine now, just because I get fed up with people asking me to drink. Like, it has nothing to do, like, I was very passionate in the beginning, like, it's gonna ruin you. But now I'm just like, I'll pour some alcohol-free wine. No one asks me anything. I don't have to go into that. I can just enjoy myself. Like,
do you find that places are serving that now, or do you get your
yes.
Okay.
Well, some places I have to like bring my own, or I just don't drink that. But most places have alcohol-free beer or something. Like,
I've had better luck with the alcohol-free beer. My issue is that I've drastically reduced the amount of grain or even grain-derived things that I'll consume. But I've noticed there are some really good tasting alcohol-free beers. If I'm in a phase where that's something I'm consuming, Athletic Brewing Company, I think there's one, Well-Being. There's a bunch now. I think even
there's a bunch of wines too. Like, I was impressed, like the Shirley, and then there's this other brand that I really like too. And it's a good way to get potassium in, because that's what they use to preserve it, is potassium bicarbonate. And there's like quite a bit of potassium in a glass of the alcohol-free wine.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I feel like I've had the Free, is it FRIS maybe?
Yeah.
Some of them taste like grape juice. And I'm like, I may as well buy some Welch's grape juice. But I feel
the art is up there now. Like, they have all these things. I do not enjoy the taste. I can't imagine most people do, but they make it taste just the same. So I just do it mostly for social.
Yeah. So I've actually, it may be that my social life has become so tame that I just don't notice, or that the people I'm with just already know. I'm not usually out with a bunch of strangers asking me. And even when I've been to weddings or whatnot, my little lemon juice and club soda, people probably assume that's like a Moscow Mule or something. Right. They just don't even ask. I don't know. Or maybe they do. I don't hear well, so maybe I don't hear them. But whatever it is, I'm typically, yeah, exactly. Selective hearing, just not answering certain things. But yeah, I typically don't do non-alcoholic alternatives when I'm out. Although I have to say, my dad, he lives in, like, it's a residential golf club basically, and they're clubhouses. And he has pushed for all of them to stock non-alcoholic beer and non-alcoholic wine. He quit drinking the same time I did. But he never had a problem. He just decided that he felt better. He did it as an experiment. He was a social drinker, like zero issue whatsoever. And now he's like, I lost my taste for wine. He went to a wine tasting a year after he quit and decided it tasted funky and like weird and somewhat sulfuric, and probably good wines, but he, whatever, lost his.
I don't like anything with, I can tell right away, and I don't like it.
I feel like white wine, when people have been drinking white wine and I smell their breath, it's nauseating to me.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. It's like a
fruity.
Yeah, but it's not fruity. It's like a foul fruity.
Yep, like a rotten fruit.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
What it is, which I shouldn't be surprised. But yeah, I mean, people drinking vodka, they just smell like hand sanitizer to me. It's less offensive. It's weird, but I probably smelled like that all the time for years. It's amazing that more people didn't notice.
Oh yeah, I'm sure I did too when I lived in New York.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little more about the subconscious and how that fits in, because
Yeah.
I feel like that's worth exploring. People might be like, all right, I'm ready. I want to make a decision to change. And that's always a weird thing, because in the moment you make a decision to change, but then you realize that, that has to carry on over into infinite moments in the future if you want it to
Well,
stick.
and we always find ourselves like doing the thing that we promised that we weren't going to do anymore, right? No
Becomes
matter
the
what it
elephant in the
is,
room.
like eating the cookies, drinking the wine, like whatever, like we promise ourselves. And the reason why we do that is because we try to use willpower. Willpower isn't going to work. You have to find out why you see benefits in whatever it is, your thing, alcohol. Like, why do you see benefits in that? Like, usually I can spot it on the first like call, like client call, what they are attaching an immense amount of pleasure to. And you have to unpack that because they're all false. Like, there's the only thing that you get from alcohol is a head change. And that head change is like we attach all these like beliefs to it. Like, I'm reducing stress, I become more social, I like whatever, like I like my spouse more when I drink. Like we attach all these beliefs, and that's what drives the behavior. If you want to undo the behavior, you have to identify those. And a lot of times it is more helpful when you have someone like walk you through it, because cognitive dissonance, like we block off parts of our brain, like we're like, that's not me. That's what self-denial is, right? That's not me. I don't do that. Like, I don't drink because I think I have more fun. Like, it depends on what phase someone's in. Like, other people will be like, oh yeah, I know what it is.
It was a huge epiphany for me when I realized that I was like giving myself permission to feel a certain way because alcohol entered the picture. And my favorite example of this is how people feel differently as soon as they see a glass of wine being poured, or as soon as they go to the liquor store. I've talked about this on the podcast with Matt Finch before, but that is like a belief driven state change. It's not a biochemical change, which is not to say that alcohol doesn't change your biochemistry, because it does, and mostly for the worse. And which is also not to say that it doesn't change your mental state, because it does. But as you say, it's the significance that you're attaching to that change.
Well, we actually, yeah, and we actually do get a dopamine release from that. Like when we just order the wine at the bar and we feel the anxiety completely leave our body before we even drink it. That's a dopamine release, because dopamine is a motivation chemical, right? And we actually are going to obtain what we set our mind on. So you have to detach that belief that it's going to make you have a better time. So you're not chasing after an imaginary like goal. Like it's imaginary.
This is very similar probably to people who have unhealthy or beliefs that don't serve them about food, right?
Yep,
It's probably the
identical.
same, right? And so was that something that, because you had been helping people with diet and fitness for some time, so was it like an epiphany for you? It's like, oh my God, alcohol is not this special mystical substance that's outside all of the rules of how our brain works.
No, but yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was. But we other it. Like we have alcohol in this other category because of all the like marketing and the TV shows and everything. Like from when we're young, we believe that you need treatment to overcome an alcohol habit. That's really what it is. It's a habit, a habitual use of a toxic substance. Like there is nothing special about it. It's no different than food. But society has told you that you're weak, and that once you're addicted to alcohol, you cannot get over it.
Right.
Like you're always going to be the weird uncle, like in the corner, right?
Yeah. I think there's also, there's so many nuances and intricacies in the relationship between the biochemical and the psychological, I guess, in this respect. So I'm thinking like a lot of people will attach enormous significance to like the first time they got high, and then they're chasing that for a long time. Or for me, the last year that I drank, I was chasing the kind of buzz that I used to get in college. And I was like, why isn't this working? I'm drinking 10 times more and I can't get it. And part of that biochemically could be because I had squeezed out all those brain chemicals. I couldn't replace them faster than I was artificially spiking them. And I wasn't giving myself the raw materials in the form of either high quality protein or fatty acids or whatever I needed, or targeted aminos. So I was just left. I was in a deficient state and I was just poisoning myself. But also, I had started to see evidence of alcohol being a highly toxic substance because of the amount I was drinking. So I was actually going through this evolution of making it into an exhausted resource because of the psychologically, because of the biochemical detriment that I was causing.
Exactly. Well, our thoughts drive our biochemistry, right? That's what depression, anxiety, all of it is. It's the way we're thinking. That's why in an instant you can cure your depression and anxiety, right? Or we have instances. I'm not trying to make light of it because it is very hard to get out of that once you're in that cycle of thinking those things. But our thoughts drive the neurochemical release, like our neurotransmitters. So you can, like, we're chasing. I think it's funny that you brought up that we're chasing those experiences that we had in youth, because I was doing the same thing. Like, I was like, I just want that back. I'm like divorced in my 30s and I didn't get my I didn't party in my 20s. I was married. And so I wanted to like chase how I felt in like high school and college. And that was not going to happen, because what happens is life gets more full and we get more experience and we're not as ignorant. Ignorance is not a bad thing. It's just we accumulate more data like over our lifetimes. And so we can't reach that same level of neurochemical release and bliss that we had in high school because we were dumb. Like,
Well,
we didn't understand the consequences.
I think that we can surpass that neurochemical release just with, we can't use suboptimal means. And so I actually have two really good, more than that, but I'll say two like best friends from college. And we used to drink our faces off in college. And I assumed, a few years later when I was kind of lonely in an apartment in New York, and they're in different cities, and I had friends in New York, but I was working all the time. They didn't want to hang out when I got off work. So I'm drinking. I'm like, why doesn't this feel like back when I was in college drinking with my friends? And then, of course, long after I quit drinking, I had like a reunion with these two friends, and they know that I don't drink anymore. And I had the most fun I've ever had with them. It was more fun than when we were drinking in college. And I was like, I was just using the alcohol as an excuse, or I attributed to the alcohol this neurochemical release that I just had without the alcohol. It's the people I was with. It had nothing to do. Like, it's not that it had nothing to do. Like, the alcohol colored that experience somewhat. And we're in college drinking culture. There's a significance there. But if we'd lived in a world where no one had discovered alcohol and I'd gone to college with those guys, I would have had the same caliber of memories.
Same amount of fun.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's interesting to me.
Yeah. The license to misbehave is a huge one. I noticed that in a lot of my friends now. And
yeah, explain that, because that's a concept that I recall reading about in the Freedom Model.
Yeah. So people like to attribute like cheating on their spouse or beating the shit out of some guy at the bar or something on the alcohol, right? It's not the alcohol. It's that we use the alcohol to justify the means, right? We desire these things in our shadow self, even if it's not conscious. That's what people really get caught up on. They're like, I don't want that. Well, you do. It's in your unconscious mind somehow, like it's in your shadow self, which we need to unpack. But you desired those things. And so then you used alcohol and you drank to excess. So you could have the excuse, because society does look upon a drunk person doing like unspeakable acts with a little more forgiveness, because they know that you lose rationality, right?
Right.
And so we use it as like the license to do these things that we want to do anyway.
I think there's an important distinction there in that, like, if you were to drive drunk and hit someone, God forbid, it's not that deep down you really wanted to hit someone. It's that the alcohol did have a biochemical effect that made you a really bad driver and you had an accident. But then there are things where, like, I blacked out, as far as I know, and I've had nightmares about this, but as far as I know, I never did anything awful or like illegal. I might have peed on a building at some, sure, that level of thing maybe. But I didn't, if that's the case, and I think it is, then that's because I didn't really want to deep down do something. And I didn't have, the alcohol wasn't a license for that kind of misbehavior.
Exactly. So an example of that is I mean, I blacked out several times when I was married to my first husband, and I never like cheated on him or slept around. And I know a lot of my girlfriends that they'll get super drunk and then cheat on their husbands. And that's just because that's what they wanted to do, and they wanted to like loosen up to that. It's permission with the alcohol, right? We take in this substance and we give ourselves permission to do these things that we desire to.
Yep.
And
Totally.
as far as like hitting someone with a car, like we might not wanted the consequence of hitting someone, but we wanted to get in our car and go home. Like I didn't drive drunk either. Like that's one thing that I've never really done either. And there's no judgment either with me saying that. I don't judge anyone for doing it. But they did want to get home. And they did want to get home in their own car.
Right. Yeah. Whatever. As I look back at
the consequence.
Yeah. I think that there's definitely a license to misbehave. And that's a weird collective consciousness phenomenon with alcohol. And yet at the same time, I do think that as people excise alcohol from their lives or adjust their use such that they're not bombarding and toxifying their brains and bodies, they then unveil a potential for themselves to act in a way in which the accumulation of all of their new actions point to a much seemingly better person. They're the same person as they were before, and yet it's easier for them to in
their integrity.
Yeah, to act with integrity, to act in accordance with their values, and hopefully to sort out issues in which they deeply desire something that consciously they wouldn't want to have to contend with.
Yeah, it helps us decipher what we really like are willing to give up in life, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're not willing to give up our spouse and our kids and our home, then we're not likely going to cheat on our spouse, right? Right. That's something but alcohol gives us that license to misbehave in that way. But if we were not happy, we would address it the appropriate way within our integrity and just tell the person that we wanted out of the marriage, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of cheating on them. That's usually what happens. We just act more in line with our integrity.
Right. So I'm curious for you, I don't know if you like this phraseology, but like what tools did you learn or what strategies did you learn as you were overcoming some of these hardships that stick with you even today? Like even maybe on a daily basis. I'll say, for example, for me, I find myself repeating my meditation mantra over and over again sometimes when I'm driving, because we have some crazy drivers in Savannah. And I think, I don't know, maybe my T levels are lower than in my early 20s when I would have engaged it. And now I'm just like repeating my mantra and I'm putting on calm music. And for me, like this morning, I have a thing, I'm trying not to eat until 11 a.m., which is not hard for me, but I've had a lot going on. And sometimes I get low blood sugar when I do that because of lack of sleep or less restful sleep. And I have other supplements for that. So that would be another strategy. But L-glutamine is a huge boon for me in the morning. So I take a little bit of L-glutamine, and then whatever the hunger pang goes away. And I'm like, oh, it's 11 a.m. I guess I have to eat now. Like, I feel like I could, if I needed to fast. And it's funny, I've never heard of this from people who are obsessed with fasting. Maybe they do say it, but I would at least just take a little L-glutamine during those low blood sugar things. So I have all these tools that are relevant for me now, even though I'm not struggling with alcohol. And I was wondering what some of yours are.
Yeah. So some things that I picked up during that time, I still take amino acids daily. And I take tyrosine, 5-HTP for sleep, the DLPA, and glutamine.
Awesome.
Glutamine because I train like a maniac. And so I need it for immune function and whatnot too. And the other ones because I've ran my DNA and I feel like intuitively I know they help me, but I've ran my DNA and I know that I have SNPs that just indicate that I need more of those substrates permanently. That's why I do well on Wellbutrin when I was using like antidepressants, because it's a dopamine reuptake inhibitor, right? And instead now I use tyrosine and DLPA in place of that. Another thing I do, I'm very big on journaling, and I picked that up when I was going through like my really rough phases of my life. So I wake up and I journal every morning still, and I listen to like spiritual minded books, because it gets my day started right and my mindset in the right place. And so I picked that up during that time, and that'll be with me forever. Cool.
Yeah, I say that I journal, but it's more, when I look at what the journaling is, it's more of just a running to-do list, which that's how my brain works, but it's therapeutic for me. So I keep doing it. Like, I like writing things down. And then every now and then, if I look through, I have like 4 notepads, because it's like a leather bound thing that a notepad slides into, that one of my best friends from growing up gave me. And so I use that. I have like 4 or 5 notepads filled with stuff in small print. And most of it's like, start getting to the gym at this time. Why don't you go to bed at this time? Some of it's a little bit, but then it's like,
inner voice.
I'm grateful for my dogs. I'm grateful for my parents. I'm grateful for my supplements. Like, there's a bunch of different stuff. Like, occasionally it's like, I'm trying to journal. I don't know if it counts as journaling, but the whole process is just therapeutic for me. And also I've tried to use it to like drum up excitement about certain things. Like, if I have an event in a few months, or if I'm going to have a reunion with some good friends, I'll use that as motivation to try to take care of my fitness, because we're going to have a group workout, or go to the beach or whatever, or start eating a little bit better, and like little tweaks. And it's been really helpful to do that over time. And then also to reflect on like the whole evolution of things. And I often look back at what I journaled like 2 years ago, and I think like, I was so dumb. Like, how did I not know that?
I do that same thing.
Yeah.
I do the same thing. So we're getting ready to move in April into a house in the area, but I found all my old journals from when I was married to my ex too, and he was very physically abusive, and I just read through some of those journals of me like processing my emotions during that time, and I was just like, oh, that poor girl. Like, I had so much compassion for my past self. Like, that's another reason why you should keep those, unless you're afraid someone's going to find them or something, but keep them in a lockbox or something. But looking back at it, you're just like, wow, I've grown so much. And we can't see that in the day to day, like how much we're growing. Like, I don't think like today, like, wow, I was so dumb like 10 years ago or anything, but you can see it when you read your writing, right?
Yeah. Good. Well, this has been, I wanted to keep this episode relatively short, and I knew it was just going to be fast paced, machine gun fire style information conveying. And I love that. But I want to make sure that you can tell people where they can find your stuff if they're interested in learning more about you and what you offer.
Yeah, it's brianattheroux.com, and Instagram is lift heavy, breathe easy, because that's my creative outlet. And Facebook is where I spend most of my time, because I like writing big, long comments when I have time. So that's where I'm at.
Great to catch up, Briana. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, Chris Scott here. If you like the information on today's episode regarding supplementation and empowerment strategies for addiction recovery, then please subscribe to the Elevation Recovery Podcast and leave us a rating and review on iTunes. And if you benefited directly from this information, I'm confident in saying that you'll love the information-packed online courses that Matt Finch and I have created. Matt Finch's Ultimate Opiate Detox 4.0 is a 6-module, 30-activity course that contains video lessons, written lessons, PDF downloads, worksheets, audios, and much more. And it has everything you could possibly need to know to conquer opioid addiction in the easiest and most comfortable way possible. My own course, Total Alcohol Recovery 2.0, is the most cutting-edge resource for anyone who wants to transcend alcohol and build their best lives. To get these courses, to learn more, and to read testimonials, simply go to opiateaddictionsupport.com/ultimate. Again, that's opiateaddictionsupport.com/ultimate for Matt's course, or for my course, go to fit-recovery.com/course. Again, that's fit-recovery.com/course. You can also go to elevationrecovery.com to see the show notes for this episode.